One of the biggest misconceptions I think people have about harpsichord technique is that it exclusively relies upon motion of the fingers. It's absolutely true that the fingers are our primary means of expressing ourselves at the harpsichord, and especially of making articulation happen. But at the same time, I think we mustn't neglect the kinds of motion that we can create with other larger parts of the body as a way of supporting the motion of the fingers. So let's look at the beginning of the D minor prelude, just so we have an idea of how this works. If, sort of naively, I decide to play the beginning of this prelude, it seems easy enough. I'm just repeating a series of broken chords, i.e. I have one hand position for the chord, and I play each note in the chord one finger at a time. So it seems like all I need to do is find my hand position, and then just articulate with the fingers one note at a time. If I repeat the first chord of the D minor prelude several times over, it sounds like this. So far, there's not really a problem with that. Where I think the problems are going to creep in are when I actually try to play the rest of the piece, because there are a couple issues with what I've just done. Issue number one is, in this hand position, without thinking about it very much, I've actually got a pretty strong deviation between the wrist and the forearm. Ideally, in fact, we want our wrist and our forearm to be more or less aligned like this, sort of creating a line between the fifth finger, the wrist, and the forearm. The other problem is maybe a little bit sneakier, and it's in holding the hand still like this to play the chord. Gradually, slowly but surely, tension is creeping into my hand simply by virtue of being held still. And in fact, it's much, much more natural for the hand to be slightly in motion as we play. And so we should look for ways of imparting a little bit of motion to the hand and the wrist and potentially also the forearm as a way of doing that. So we're going to talk about two different ways to do that. The first way is to use a little bit of forearm rotation. This is sometimes called turning the doorknob, this kind of motion. And again, this is one of these motions that I think is better recognized in piano playing, but I think it also has a place in harpsichord playing as a way of delivering the weight of the arm from finger to finger. So instead of just holding my wrist static like this, I'm now going to impart a very subtle turning motion, first turning down this way, and then turning more swiftly back this way when I go back up. So this is already better. My hand has a little bit of motion to it. It's less tense, but I think we can still go further. And what's missing now, I think, is a real sort of engagement with how the weight of the hand gets transferred from finger to finger. So if I play just a single finger, let's say the first finger of this chord, the A, in order for everything to feel as stable as possible, I want to almost be balancing the weight of my hand and my arm and focusing it through this single finger, through my fourth finger. I have very much the sensation right now of standing on the fourth finger. This is a sensation that's much, much easier to discover for yourself if you play at the clavichord, because on the clavichord, in fact, if you don't do this, you won't get any tone. In a future video, we'll look at how this works at the clavichord. If I want to then move to the next finger, I have to transfer the weight of the fourth finger to now the second finger on F. And I can do that by rotating. But in addition to that, I want to feel almost that my hand is centered around the finger that actually has to play. And that means that the forearm also needs to make some very small, subtle movement to center the hand around the second finger. And then if I go down to the thumb, the process continues, centering the hand. And notice that I'm using both a little bit of motion of the forearm, moving closer into the side of my body, as well as a bit of rotation. And so if I do that same opening chord repeatedly like that, using both of these motions, the degree of motion is really pretty small. It's a subtle movement, but it makes a world of difference for creating a feeling of relaxation within the hand. And it should make it much, much more possible, A, to play the chords faster, and B, to make sure that I can play all of these chords from the beginning of the piece to the very end.